An interesting introspective process is the reflection on how what we call the civilized side of us is mainly reflected in the public part of us. What does it mean? That what we call being civilized appears to be mostly practiced when we are public, meaning when we are outside mostly, or when we are fundamentally dealing with interacting with other people. For example, imagine we have an hysterical crisis. Imagine someone knocks on the door, or the phone rings suddenly, and we suppress this hysteria almost immediately. However, this civilized influence is not quite always reflected in the same way on the private side of us, which means the proclivity to be civilized that we usually adopt, unless we are savages, of course, when we interact with other people, does not quite have the same influence when we are private in our private sphere of thinking, which instead usually remains rather primitive. An example of this, for instance, suppose we have a disagreement with someone, and publicly we maybe try to be kind and calm and polite in our arguments we exchange with that person, but internally, privately, we think maybe the most vulgar things, perhaps, about the same very person. Now, trying to understand the reason for this gap between the private psychology and the public psychology, the gap between the presumably civilized public aspect of us and the very much primitive, in most cases, and often irascible or weird or savage private aspect. Trying to understand the reason behind this gap could contribute to a progressive erosion of this gap, thus decreasing the primitiveness of the private sector of our lives and dismantling gradually the hypocrisy of the public side of us.